In this video, we'll be going over the Voyager 2 tour of the solar system to demonstrate how to make planetary flyby scenes. And like always, we've added all the scene files in the GitHub repository in this directory. The bash and load scripts all are going to be exactly the same for all 4 scenes, and all the spice catalogs will have the Voyager 2 BSP in them, and they will have a spice kernel specific to the flyby planet, which contains ephemeris data for the planet and its moons. All of those kernels can be found on the NAIF website, and we'll leave a link in the description to where you can find them, but we don't include them in the GitHub repository because they are very large files. All of the spacecraft catalogs are going to be exactly the same except for the start times and the centers, which will all be set to when the flyby was and the flyby planet. The Python scripts are all going to look a bit different, with this Jupiter flyby scene being the most busy. And flyby scenes like this one are the most time consuming to make because all of these commands' duration times and desired camera movements are all done by trial and error. So to get started, there is a vector pointing towards Earth, showing the high gain antenna pointing in that direction. There's a velocity vector, Callisto vector, then moving to the Ganymede vector, and we can see all these commands over here. Then after a little bit, there will also be the Europa pointing vector, and then a bit of a rotation of the camera around Voyager 2, and then eventually we'll get to the Saturn vector, and at the end, showing that the velocity vector is rotating towards that Saturn vector. Next up is the Saturn flyby scene, which is actually a bit more simple here. There's only just a few vector commands that are in this scene and then some rotations, and messing with the time here because 30,000 time was a bit too fast when doing the up close part of the Saturn flyby. So slowing that down to 10,000 and then waiting a while and then going back to 30,000. Next is a Uranus flyby, where we can very clearly see the inclination of the orbital planes of its moons and its own axis of rotation, which is one of the many things that makes Uranus so interesting. And finally, for the Neptune flyby, we didn't want to do a Voyager 2 CAD model view because the orbital inclination change makes it very difficult to control the orientation of the camera, and this way we can get a good view of that inclination change. And also note that there are some extra commands here that we haven't shown in the previous videos, like dolly and show star and constellation names. In the next video, we'll be going over how to create quaternion attitude spice kernels using the spice utility predict to have more active attitude scenes, like in this scene of Europa Clipper, where the spacecraft begins pointing its x-axis at Jupiter, then changes to point at Ganymede during the flyby, and then rotates its body so the engines are pointed towards the velocity vector.